Okay, YouTubers, this is Joe from ArtAlienTV. Now today I've got a few things to show you. I've got a couple of new things, 2 or 3 new things, and I'm going to show you some things that I found years ago, which most of you probably haven't seen, and I've just put some new Gigapans of those areas where those things are up as well. So I'm going to briefly show you them in about 5 or 10 minutes. But first of all, we're going to look at this. Now this is a really recent one. This is from the Perseverance rover, Sol 145, mass left. This is completely raw, nothing done to this image whatsoever. It's just been enlarged and then loaded up to this Gigapan site. And this is a really nice clear ridge or mound, which is probably, or may well be, a ruined structure. I couldn't tell you for sure with this one, but there's lots of what look like architectural fragments all over this image. And it's nice and clear, lots of detail, nice and bright. This is why I didn't bother enhancing this, because actually it's so clear you don't need to. You can see everything. And if you want to see these things a bit better, all you have to do really is take a clip, for instance, of these weird things here, like I've done, and then color correct it a little bit, play with the color temperature, color correct it, and maybe add some contrast, about 10 or 15% or something like that, maybe 20%. And that's all you've got to do. And the first things, now I've looked over this, now there's loads of weird stuff in here and I don't really understand what a lot of it is. Most of it's just rock, obviously. But these things were really weird, and this may be partly a sort of optical trick, because we have this ridge of sand here, which is like a dune, coming right across the image here, and it's obscuring this thing here. Now this was weird, because what this looks like to me is a figurine, or perhaps something similar, standing up, or perhaps even sitting up against this rock, and the sand dune in front is obscuring the lower half of this thing, and we're only seeing the top part. And if I show you with the magnifier, I'll show you what I mean. We got a head with what look like 2 eyes, a nose and a mouth, a bit vague, an arm sticking up, perhaps, or something sticking up, and a body here, and a shoulder with an arm coming down here. You can actually see the shadow where the armpit is there, just there, okay? Now, it's not very clear, and there's also this weird rock here. Now, this is a weird sort of jumble of stuff going on here, but there's also a head on the side of this, which is rather strange. So this looks like these may have been related to each other, may have even been joined together, who knows? But they're the same sort of style and the same sort of scale. This head here is very similar in size to this one. And if I show you that, this isn't very clear either. But when you enhance it, you can start to see some of these details just here. Okay? Really weird. And we got these kind of rocks all kind of stuck together. Now, some of this stuff may have been stuck together with clay or mortar at one point, and may have been part of a structure that's now been exploded and broken up, like we've seen hundreds of times before in this area and in Gale Crater. So who knows? But basically, I'll show you what I've got. There's also this weird thing here. This looks like a head just here. Now, this is a bit hard to get your head round, or your eyes round. But if you look really carefully, you got an eye here, you got a nose, and we've got a mouth here with what look like teeth. Slightly vampiric looking head. I may be wrong on that, I'm not sure. But unfortunately, like that other one, it's obscured by this sand dune here, right? So the sand is kind of obscuring our view here. So I'm hoping we get some more close-ups of this from another angle in later days coming up, maybe, okay? We might get lucky on that. So I'll show you the enhancement real quick and I'll move on to the other things. So I don't want to take too long on each thing here. So I've got a bunch of things to show you. And I've got a close-up of one of the things I posted the other day as well, which was the weird plant-shaped twisted object, which looked a bit like 2 pieces of metal twisted together. I'm going to show you that in a minute. There's been some really nice close-ups of that. This is really strange, and let me show you this one first, because this is a close-up of that possible figurine, okay? We've got a head here with an ear just sticking out there. Right, let's do that again. We've got an ear sticking out there. We've got a head coming around like that, up to there, like this. We got an eye there, possibly, and one there. A nose, which is a bit vague, and what looks like a mouth there. Now this looks like an arm or something, I'm not really sure. There's some weird details on this thing, sticking up. It's got these kind of finger-like structures or something going on there. I don't know what that is. I don't know if it's an arm, I'm just calling it that. It could be anything really. It's got these weird sort of details on it. And then we've got what seems to be an arm coming down here. And the armpit, this is the armpit there. There's not much detail in here. This is quite a long way off and it's not very big. This thing overall would probably come down to about here, I would imagine. And there may be a body there underneath it and an arm coming round like this. I don't know. I'm guessing. But it looks like something interesting. And even in the raw image, it looks a bit like a person. But the shadow goes right down across it here at an angle. And we're not seeing a lot of detail in there. It's very strange. Let's get rid of that. I'm not really sure whether it's a figurine or something else, but it looks like a figurine to me. And I have found a lot in this area already, mostly of animals and things like that. So who knows? But let's check it out on here because there's another one here. Now this has been enhanced. You can actually see, if I push the contrast a bit more, I might be able to bring that out more for you. If you go a bit darker, it might push those shadows a bit more and you'll see the eyes pop out now. You can see one there, one there. Let's go darker again. There we are, you can see that one there now and that one there. You can see what looks like a mouth appearing now and the shadow on the nose is more prominent and you can see that ear sticking out and a weird shaped head and the sort of very chubby cheeks sticking out there coming round, okay? So sometimes you need to darken it a bit more to bring stuff out. And on this one, you've got this weird sort of collection of rocks kind of stuck together in a sort of group. There's another one there and another one behind that. That sort of joins to that and then it comes around. And there's a whole, it looks very complex. This looks like it's been ruined and may have been part of a wall or structure. But on the side of it here, we've got another one of these heads, like the one I just showed you. And you can even see an eye here, an eye here, a little round nose, and a mouth. You can even see that there's teeth detail here and here, and a quite pronounced chin on this one, right? Very strange indeed, right? Weird as. And as usual, like I said before, I know a lot of you have said that some of this stuff is really weird. Weird is the norm on Mars. They seem to have been obsessed with figurines and carvings and statuettes and statues and had lots of stone buildings which are now mostly buried. And this actual ridge that this is on, I think is probably a ruined structure like I've shown before. A lot of these mounds in the Jezero crater, there's another one over here, are probably ruined structures that are literally smashed to pieces and largely buried in sand, okay? So this may have been quite a tall structure and it's all collapsed down. So what a lot of these blocks may be are actual parts of the building, some of the outer masonry that's fallen down, and they were making these buildings, it seems, out of quite irregular shaped rocks, not finely cut rectangular or square blocks like we would normally use on Earth. A lot of them were made in a sort of dry stone wall technique or just with random shapes and then mortar or stuck together with clay or whatever, and just piled up on top of each other. So they were quite crude structures, I would say, okay? So that's where you need to look for these. Very strange, I'm not really sure about this. They do look like they're sort of carved or sculpted, I should say, but they're a bit too far away. This is, I would say, probably over 50 feet away from the rover. So, and they're not very big, so there's not a great deal of detail here. This is weird stuff, and this kind of looked like a guy waving to me, but I don't know if this is an arm he's sticking up here, because it seems too thick and too wide. If this was an arm, I would have thought it would only come to about there. Who knows? what that really is. I don't know. It's very strange. Like I said, it may be some kind of optical trick, this one, because other similar things have been found and they've turned out to be optical tricks. But I would say 50-50. But when you see it, it's very strange. And there's definitely a head shape with a mouth and nose, 2 eyes, and a funny shaped thing on top of the head there, like a hat or representing some kind of headgear or something, and an ear sticking out there. So who knows? Maybe it is. This is the thing I showed in my previous video, and I called it the WTF plant. Well, on here I did anyway. I don't think it's a plant, but it's shaped a bit like one. And we've got these weird details, this thing kind of spiraling round. Okay, and this thing coming around like this, but what looks a bit like a head on the end of it, with these weird limbs or appendages sticking out. Now, there is a close-up of this, and this has actually made the press. And here it is. Here's the article. NASA rover spots whimsical rock arch on Mars that's defying erosion. And I won't read all this out, but basically it says it looks rather strange, and it is probably some kind of harder material. I think it's probably made of metal or some sort of alloy or a very hard metallic element that hasn't eroded as much as the surrounding rock or concrete. Now, bear in mind, now this is a close-up of it, bear in mind that on many of these things, well, in many of these images recently I've shown evidence of concrete erosion leaving behind metal rebar or reinforced steel or metal bars or mesh that were in a lot of these eroded structures, which are now eroded away. Okay, I think this may be another case of that. Now, unfortunately, with this image here, these are ChemCam images, it only shows the central part of the image. It doesn't show the whole thing. Now, I was actually really interested in this part down here, because if you look at this on here, this part down here, we have a rectangular part attached to it. We've got a part sticking out there, and this bit here is rectangular. And it looks like an attachment of some sort. Now, I'm not sure what it is, but it doesn't look like just some random eroded hard material that's just eroded away. This looks like something else to me. This looks like an intelligently made object that was probably part of a structure, perhaps a column or something, and there was a spiral, 2 spiral kind of thick bars going through this thing, probably going right down into the ground here in a spiral shape like this. Now, in this article, they did compare it to a DNA kind of spiral, a helix sort of shape, and there's a couple of explanations here to what they think it is. And structurally, this doesn't make a lot of sense unless it's artificial. In other words, I think this thing was part of perhaps a structure that goes right down into the ground, and this is the top part of it, and it goes down in a spiral. So we've got one part coming round and spiraling, and the other one spiraling round the other way, and they meet up. Okay, now it could have been a column, it could have been something else, but part of a structure. And this is the metallic substance that was used for the reinforcement of that said structure, which was probably made of concrete. I've shown many concrete structures in the area that are eroded and with grid-like wire or bar pieces sticking out in grids and in long lines and all sorts of patterns and stuff. And this is consistent with that, I would say. So that's what I think it is. I could be wrong. But when you get up close, you can see these weird details. And this is why I called it a plant or plant object, because I thought maybe these were leaves or branches sticking out here, these parts here. But I just think that's where there was probably smaller parts of wire coming off this. So what I think this is possibly an aperture. In other words, a inside skeletal structure of a constructed column or sculpture. This may have been part of a sculpture or a column, I can't tell you which. In sculpture, the skeleton of a sculpture is called the aperture. It's basically a rough, a kind of, I use wire, I use quite a thick wire, and make it into the either a long or a wide shape, depending on what I'm making. And then I put the clay over it, okay? So you form a skeleton first, and then you build on top of it. Now, a similar technique is used when you make things from concrete or other types of material, or even if you're making a building out of other things. Often the skeletal structure of the building is made either of wood or metal or whatever to hold it in place, a bit like an internal skeleton. So what this may be, if it's not a plant or something like coral, some kind of weird coral, which it could be, this could actually be an aperture. Because when you have, say, quite a tall structure, like a tall statue or a tall column, if it's made of concrete, the concrete alone isn't really strong enough. But if you have metal bars going through it, like rebar, reinforced concrete, either in a mesh or in columns or twisted round or whatever, then this gives it tensile strength and makes it a lot stronger, okay? And here's an example of what I mean. Now, this is much bigger and much more complex, obviously, but this is some of the structure, internal aperture or skeleton of the Statue of Liberty, okay? And let's have a close-up look at that. Very complex, and you've got these kind of metal bars and things all attached to each other, and steel girders and stuff like that. This is far more elaborate, obviously. But if you can imagine something like this on a small scale, and perhaps inside a smaller structure or statue, incidentally, we have another spiral one here. This is like a double helix kind of sculpture, okay? It's something like this, but on a much, much smaller scale, okay? This is the Statue of Liberty again. You've got the internal structure, and when you have these limbs sticking up, which are quite narrow, obviously you would probably have a spiral structure inside that to hold it together, stop it breaking off, okay? Gives it tensile strength. And the outer part of it is made of, I think, concrete, okay? And then we've got a sort of rock base to it like that, made of stone. And if you can imagine something like this, but on maybe only 5 foot tall or a few feet tall, it may be much, much taller. Now, if this thing was only a few inches in size, this is about 6 inches tall, okay, maybe 7. And that's been confirmed by some of the scientists who wrote parts of this article, okay? And it's quite small. So if this is an aperture or skeleton or skeletal structure of some kind of building or whatever, or sculpture, then I would imagine it would be really long, because you wouldn't need to build an aperture for something that's only that big, okay? You just wouldn't need to. So this must go right down into the ground for that to be even necessary. In other words, this may go right down 10 feet or 6 feet or 20 feet. I have no idea. But the point is, if it is what I think it is, an aperture or skeletal structure of a column or statue, there would be no need to build these reinforced spirals into it unless it was really long and quite narrow. So I'd imagine it's quite a narrow thing going right down into the ground, and this is part of the internal skeleton that's eroded and corroded. And some of these limb parts, I think, may be where there were other pieces of it coming off and coming out. But I may be wrong. This could actually be something else. And moorings have been found in this area. There are also lots of numbers in this area, which I've shown recently, which are not far from here, which look like they're off the side of a boat. So this may be a boat mooring, and this may have had concrete over it, and this may be a bollard. And this was the internal structure of the bollard or mooring loop, and you would have thrown the chain or rope over this when you moored your boat next to it, okay? It could be something as simple as that. So this may be a concrete structure just here, underneath it, coming down, with these spiral parts sticking up, and you may have either thrown your rope or chain through it and looped over it or something like that, I don't know. So it could be either of those things, but to me it's very strange. And the explanation given by these so-called scientists is oversimplified and doesn't really explain why it would look like that. They explain what they're looking at, but they don't explain why it looks like it looks. This is what they always do. And they do have a rather flippant attitude, a lot of these scientists, people at NASA and people related to them. They're pretty flippant about these things. They came up with something recently called butt crack rock, and it made me quite annoyed because basically it was just a rock with a split in it and a little bit like a butt crack, okay? And that goes to show the flippant and rather childish nature of these people who work on these rovers and never really seem to study these images properly. They only give a cursory glance to them and usually make up some stupid name and with some sort of innuendo to it. It's really quite childish, okay? I think there's a reference to butt crack rock here somewhere. But basically, yeah, it's 6.5 inches, this thing, according to planetary geologist Michel Miniti. A delicate arch is likely made up of material that's resistant to erosion. Yeah, metal, okay? The Gale crater is a dusty and windy place and the rocky landscape shows signs of this, of course. But they don't say why it's shaped like that. Now, why would a natural structure end up in a spiral pattern like we have here? I really can't see that unless it's either some kind of weird fossilized coral, which was growing in that way, or it's an actual structure that's eroded away, and this is the internal metal, rebar, or skeletal aperture. Okay. Now this is Mars Science Laboratory. That's the Curiosity rover, Sol 1434, mast right. This has been slightly enhanced, but only a little bit. West-northwest view. Okay, looking away from Mount Sharp towards the edge of the crater in the background. And we've got this long ridge line, and just down here, we've got another ridge here. These are probably ruined structures, some of these here. And just down here, there's this thing that I coined the Enigma Machine, okay? Now, I did a video on this back in 2017, and it was in the press. I got it published in a few newspapers. I would dig up the article. Basically, this article goes right back to 2017. It says, has a cash register been spotted on Mars? Conspiracy theorist claims NASA has found a machine on the red planet. Now, I said it in my article that I sent them, I said it looks a bit like a cash register or typewriter or something like that. I called it the Enigma Machine, which also looks like a typewriter or cash register, okay? And I've got the original video up here. I'll link to this. I'll see if I can find the full article. This is just the video link. They may have deleted it now, but I mean it was like 4 years ago. Now here's the original video. Now this was from 2017 March, 80-odd thousand views. Now the only reason this had that many views is because it was in the newspaper, and I'll play a clip of it now. I won't play all of it. This is just the last minute. Okay, here's that image. This is the raw image, obviously, raw clip, and then it zooms in. But unfortunately, with this set of images, they're really grungy and distorted. You can see the distortion in the image. So what I may do is take a new clip of this and see if I can tidy it up a bit more. But when you look at it, basically you can see these weird lever-like structures on the side. We've got these weird details on top here, sticking up like wires or something. And then we've got a bunch of what look like keys or buttons. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 or 8 of them in a row here. And it's at a very strange angle. Now, when we look at the thing itself with the magnifier, it's got this weird angle here. And it seems to be sticking up and angled towards us. In other words, it's tilted, which means it must be attached to something lower down for it to hover like that above the ground. You can see the shadow there and the bottom of this thing here, okay? Very strange indeed. Now, I've never really figured out what this thing is. I had to give it a name. Of course, when you find as many things as I do, if you don't name things and call them something, it's very hard to categorize them and organize them in any sort of way. You have to give things a name. And you know, even people at NASA do this when they find things, and they call them stupid things like butt crack rock or something, which is childish and stupid. But at least then you have a reference for that object. You have to give it a name, okay? This is why I do it. Otherwise, you'd never remember all these things and what to call them if you just gave them a number or something, okay? They have to be given some kind of title. It doesn't mean that's what they are. It just means that's what they look a bit like, okay? And that's all you can do, really, a lot of the time, because you don't really know what they are. But you can see those weird details there. These things that look like either buttons or keys or something. Let's play a bit more of that video. And it will show you some comparative images coming up now. So this is one of my favourite finds, really, and you can really see on here where I've really pushed the colour and the contrast. You've got these weird kind of parts on top, which are like wires or something, and it looks a bit like one of these. Now imagine something like this that had been left for 20, 50,000 years or something. Imagine what would happen to something like that. It would all corrode away and would look pretty crusty and eroded. This is an Enigma machine from World War II. You can see the keys here. It's got this box-like shape to it as well, like the one on Mars. So I don't really know what it is, but I had to give it a name, and I called it the Enigma or cash register or typewriter, depending on which newspaper story you go with, really, because they obviously change details that you give them. So there it is, the typewriter or Enigma machine. We got what looks like the part here, the box type part, a bit like on Enigma here. And then it kind of curves up. We got these weird details on top, and these strange lever-like things like we get on a cash register or on a typewriter or something. It could be almost anything. It could be part of a boat, it could be part of a building, don't know. But why would it have these weird key-like structures along the side? Here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, as if there's keys or buttons on it, okay? Very strange. And incidentally, in this same image, over here, there's another weird thing that I found just before I found that, in 2017. And I called it the hammerhead. Now, I don't know what this is either, but it looks like a piece of wreckage, and it's metallic. Now, there it is. You've got this weird thing sticking up with a tube-like structure on top, which is actually metallic. This is shiny. This is not just a rock, this is metallic. And so this may be another example of something that was inside a structure, and the outer concrete has eroded away. So this may also be an aperture. For some reason this keeps cutting out. I don't know what's going on here. It will get closer. When you enhance it, it's very reflective, this part here. So I think this is metallic. And like I said, I suspect now, after having found so much concrete, eroded concrete and rebar everywhere, this may have been inside something, and the outer parts have eroded away, leaving the metal structure, the metallic structure behind inside. So this may be an aperture or a part of some kind of object other than a rock. Okay, there it is. You can see how reflective this is, and it's very straight. So that's artificial. Don't know what it is, but it's artificial. So like with a lot of these things on Mars, you can only really give them a sort of approximate name. You don't really know what they are. So you have to call them something so you can refer to them and then cross-reference them with other things, categorize them, and then put them with other things and work out maybe what they are, or at least work out what they're not. And one thing is for sure, with a lot of these things I'm showing on Mars, most of the things I show on Mars are not just rocks. Some of them are made of rock and are carved, but that doesn't mean they're a rock. A lot of these things are metallic. A lot of these things were parts of structures which are now eroded or broken down or exploded or whatever. And there's loads of these weird metal objects sticking out of the ground in some areas. And I think they were actual apertures or metal skeletal parts of structures which were sticking up and have now eroded away, okay? So thanks for watching, everybody. Please like and subscribe and give the thumbs up and share on social media. I will see you soon.